Hi. So the reason that I figured that I would go to video at this point is because I wanted to talk about democracy, which can be a little confusing. When we think of democracy, we often think about the idea of voting for somebody to become president or to be a governor, but democracy includes a lot more than simply voting and elections. There is this group of what I'm calling components of democracy. And the reason that I call them components of democracy is that for a country to truly be considered a country, these 5 things really need to be in place. So number 1, there needs to be voting and elections. Okay, that's the physical mechanism that makes up a democracy. That's how our voices are generally heard in a democracy, is we elect somebody to represent us. There also needs to be this thing called justice, or what is also called the rule of law. And that means that everybody is treated equally under the law, number 1. And number 2, that there are constitutional limits placed on what government can do. So that's an idea called the rule of law. And the third component that I've listed out is equality, meaning that everybody has a fair chance at improving their lives. In the United States, we think of equality as being equality of opportunity, not as much as we think of it as being equality of outcome. We're going to talk about that more in just a minute. And then finally, there's this idea, not finally because there's a couple more, sorry. This idea called liberty, or the idea that we have freedom from government, is another component of democracy. And then finally, we need to have an independent, free press, or what we call today the news media. The news media needs to be able to report stories independently of government. And that's important because that's how we get our information regarding government. So we need to have a news media that can actually openly criticize the government without reporters worrying about going to prison. So that's incredibly important in a democracy. Now, if I was you sitting on the other side of this computer-generated message, I would be probably saying to myself, wait, but we don't really have good levels of equality in the United States. Or right now, our news media isn't very trustworthy for a number of different reasons. And I agree with you about both of those points, absolutely. But when I think of democracy and these components of democracy, what I imagine is sort of the levers on like a sound mixing board that move up and they move down. So if you think about it this way, when it comes to a democracy, like the United States, for example, you have this lever called equality that goes up sometimes, and by that I mean over time some people have more equality, but then there are also things that affect how much equality the people have. And over time it goes up, and then it goes down, and then it goes up, and then it goes down. And the same is true of liberty, the idea that we have freedom from government. Sometimes we have more freedom from government, and then sometimes we have less freedom from government. So all of these components of government go up and down all the time. That's why I say that democracy is an evolving form of government. It's never perfect, but over time it does shoot to include as many people as possible. And, ultimately, when you think of that first component that I talked about, the idea of voting in elections, that's one of the things that makes our participation and our involvement so important. If that's how our voices are heard, it's essential that we make our voices heard. If we're lucky enough to have the ability to vote. But anyway, that's just me preaching. So I'll see you on our next little video installation. Until then, bye.